The women of the Holy Land, women in the shadow of the Crusades. History tells us much about the heroes of the Crusades, the armored knights, the brave kings, the legendary battles. But there is a world we rarely speak of. The world of women who were equally present on the dusty roads of the Holy Land, in the shadows of castles, in the midst of battles. They did not merely wait for their husbands or sons to return home. They themselves were part of this bloody and elevating history. Today we will talk about who these women were, how they lived, what they did, and why it is so important that we remember them. In the summer of the year 1096, when the First Crusade began, no one would have thought that this enterprise would be a matter not only for men, but reality painted a quite different picture. Alongside knights, priests, and soldiers, women also set out on the long journey to Jerusalem. Some beside their husband or brother, others as pilgrims, still others simply because they felt God was calling them. Medieval chroniclers did not write much about them, but if we read the sources carefully, we can discover surprising things. When the Crusader army set out from Constantinople, the Byzantine emperor Alexios Komnenos watched in astonishment as such a multitude passed through his empire. Albert of Aachen, a chronicler who is one of the most important sources of the First Crusade, writes, "Not only warriors and knights, but countless women and children also traveled with them, who left their homes for the holy cause." This was not mere poetic exaggeration. The army was truly mixed, and this presented enormous challenges. Many dangers awaited these women on the road. The scorching deserts, the attacks of the Turks, diseases and famine threatened everyone. But women were in a particularly vulnerable situation. Contemporary sources report that when the Crusaders crossed through Asia Minor, the Turks captured many women. Some managed to escape, others ended up in slavery. Yet many survived the journey and made it to Jerusalem. After the battle for Jerusalem, which took place in July of the year 1099, when the Crusaders won a bloody victory and captured the Holy City, women also participated in reorganizing the city's life. Not only the wives of nobles remained there, but also ordinary women who established their homes, opened shops, founded convents. The birth of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was not only a military, but also a social process, and women had a key role in this. But who was the woman who perhaps did the most for the survival of the Crusader states? One of the most important names is Queen Melisende. She was the daughter of Baldwin II, King of Jerusalem, and in the year 1143, when her father died, Melisende became the ruler of Jerusalem, and not just formally. According to medieval laws, a woman should have had a husband or son to represent her. But Melisende was different. She herself governed the country, made decisions, led wars, and concluded diplomatic alliances. Melisende's marriage to Fulk III, Count of Anjou, was a political necessity. European knights found it difficult to accept that a woman could rule independently. But Melisende did not allow her husband to completely take over power. The chronicles state that there were serious conflicts between them because Fulk felt that his wife was too independent. Finally, in the year 1152, Fulk died, and Melisende's son, the young Baldwin III, became king. But in reality, his mother governed the country for many more years. Melisende was not only a politician, but also a patron of the arts and the church. She founded the convent in Bethany, where her sister Iveta became abbess. This convent served not only as a religious center, but also as a kind of refuge for widows and orphaned girls. Melisende understood that supporting women was not only a moral duty, but also political wisdom. Another remarkable figure was Agnes of Courtenay, whom historians often demonize. Agnes was born around the year 1154 and married young to Amaury, Count of Jerusalem, who later became king. But when Amaury became king in the year 1162, church leaders questioned the validity of their marriage. Agnes was related to her husband, and according to medieval canon law, this presented a problem. The marriage was annulled, although their children, Baldwin IV and Sibylla, remained legitimate. Agnes then withdrew from court, but not for long. When her son Baldwin IV became king, Agnes returned to the center of politics. The young king suffered from leprosy and was increasingly unable to govern the country. His mother gained enormous influence in the situation. The Latin sources, written primarily by Western clerics, portray Agnes as a schemer and intriguer. But the Arab sources speak more interestingly. Ibn al-Athir, the famous Muslim historian, mentions Agnes as the secret power of the Franks' court, who understood the art of politics better than many men. Agnes indeed played a significant role in who occupied key positions in the kingdom. She helped the rise of Guy de Lusignan, who eventually became Sibylla's husband and king of Jerusalem. This decision proved fatal because Guy proved to be a weak leader and led to the catastrophe at Hattin in the year 1187. But Agnes could not see into the future. She tried to survive and have influence in a world where women had few opportunities. Queen Sibylla, Agnes's daughter, was perhaps the woman with the most tragic fate in the history of the Crusader kingdoms. She was born around the year 1160 and, according to contemporary sources, was a beautiful and intelligent woman. Her first marriage to William of Montferrat ended in tragedy. Her husband died shortly after their wedding, and Sibylla was left alone with a small son, the future King Baldwin V. When her mother and the royal court persuaded her to marry Guy de Lusignan, Sibylla probably did not know what consequences this decision would have. Guy was militarily incompetent. After the defeat at the Battle of Hattin, when the Crusader army was destroyed and Saladin conquered Jerusalem, many blamed Guy, but Sibylla remained faithful to her husband. She stood by him even when the nobles rebelled against him. In the year 1190, during the Third Crusade, when the English king Richard the Lionheart arrived in the Holy Land, Sibylla and Guy still ruled, at least nominally. But the situation was unsustainable. Sibylla died in the year 1190 from an epidemic in Acre, and her two small daughters died with her. This tragedy ended Guy's right to the throne because, according to the kingdom's laws, he was king only as Sibylla's husband. But who followed Sibylla to the throne? Here, Isabella, Sibylla's half-sister, enters the story. Isabella was born in the year 1172 as the daughter of King Baldwin IV and Maria Comnene. Isabella's life was full of forced situations and difficult decisions. She was first married to Humphrey of Toron, but when Sibylla died and the kingdom needed a new queen, the nobles forced Isabella to leave her husband and marry Conrad, Marquis of Montferrat. Isabella initially protested. Annulling a marriage was a serious matter in medieval canon law, and Isabella respected her husband. But political pressure was stronger. Conrad was a popular and militarily capable leader who defended Tyre against Saladin. The nobles thought Conrad would be the ideal king alongside Isabella. Finally, Isabella consented, and in the year 1192, she married Conrad. But fate treated Isabella cruelly. Conrad was murdered by assassins in the year 1192. Isabella was widowed for the second time and again had to choose a new husband. Her next husband became Henry of Champagne, who was also popular among the Crusaders. But Henry died in the year 1197 in an unfortunate accident. He fell from a window in Acre. Isabella was widowed for the third time. Her fourth husband was Amaury of Lusignan, who became ruler of Cyprus and also nominal king of Jerusalem. With this marriage, Isabella finally experienced more peaceful times, but her life shows well how women were regarded as instruments in medieval politics. Isabella could not choose her own life. Others always decided for her. After Isabella's death, her daughters inherited the Jerusalem title, but the Crusader kingdoms had already fallen apart. However, the role of women did not end there. Throughout the 13th century, there were still queens and regents who tried to hold together the remaining Crusader states. But not only queens shaped the history of the Holy Land. There were also ordinary women whose names were not preserved, but who participated in daily life, in the defense of castles, in battles. The chronicles mention that when Saladin besieged Jerusalem in the year 1187, women also helped with the defense. They carried water to the soldiers fighting on the walls, cared for the wounded, and prayed for victory. A particularly moving story has been preserved about how, when Saladin finally entered Jerusalem, many Christian women who had no money for ransom ended up in slavery. But Saladin's brother Al-Adil asked the Sultan to give him some slave women as a gift. When Saladin agreed, Al-Adil immediately freed them. This generous act showed that not only among Christians but also among Muslims, there were those who respected women and felt compassion for them. Nuns also played an important role in the life of the Holy Land. The Bethany Convent, the Convent of St. Anne, and other religious communities fulfilled not only religious but also social functions. They healed the sick, educated children, and provided refuge for women who had lost their families. These convents functioned even during wartime, and often it was precisely the nuns who maintained the spiritual strength of the Christian community. The history of the Crusades is therefore not complete if we do not speak of women. They were there beside the knights, on castle ramparts, among prayers and tears. Some were queens, others ordinary women, but all were part of this grandiose and tragic history. If you like this story about the women of the Holy Land, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the like button. Many more exciting stories await us from the world of the Crusades, and you must not miss out. At the beginning of the 13th century, when the Fourth Crusade took a catastrophic turn and the Crusaders attacked Constantinople instead of the pagans, again it was women who suffered most. Byzantine empresses and noblewomen were forced to watch as their city was ravaged and their temples plundered. Some tried to flee. Others ended up in captivity or died. One of the most famous Byzantine women affected by this tragedy was the French princess Agnes, who became the wife of Byzantine Emperor Alexios II. When the Crusaders captured Constantinople in the year 1204, Agnes was forced to flee. Later, the Latin Emperor Baldwin IV married her as part of a new marriage to legitimize his rule in Byzantium. But Agnes never forgot what devastation the Crusaders, who were supposed to be holy, had wrought in her city. Another important woman in this period was Maria of Montferrat, who would have been Queen of Jerusalem if the Crusader kingdom had not fallen apart. Maria's small daughter, Yolanda, later became the wife of the German Roman Emperor Frederick II, and this marriage determined the politics of the mid-13th century. Frederick led a crusade in the year 1228, although he was under papal excommunication. This crusade was not particularly successful militarily, but Frederick achieved through diplomatic means that Jerusalem returned to Christian hands, at least temporarily. Yolanda, however, did not live to see her husband's glory. She died in childbirth in the year 1228, at only 15 years of age. Her life and death show well how dangerous it was to be a woman in the Middle Ages. Childbirth was one of the greatest killers, and even queens could not escape it. From the mid-13th century, the Crusader states grew weaker and weaker. The last great bastions, Acre, Tyre, Sidon, fell one by one to the Mamluk conquerors. When Acre finally fell in the year 1291, the Crusader presence in the Holy Land practically ended. And again it was women who paid the highest price. Many ended up in captivity, others tried to flee to Cyprus or Europe, but many perished in the last battles and sieges. One of the last surviving stories is about an unknown woman who defended the city during the siege of Acre. According to the chronicles, when the Mamluks prepared for the final assault, this woman climbed onto the walls and threw stones at the besiegers. Finally, an arrow struck her, and she fell. Her name is unknown, but her heroism reminds us that in history, it is often ordinary people, both men and women, who make the greatest sacrifices. Why is it important today to remember these women? Because history is not just about kings and battles. History is about people, about women, children, ordinary people who tried to survive and find meaning in their lives. The world of the Crusades was brutal and cruel, but the human stories, especially those of women, show that even in the greatest darkness, there was dignity, courage, and hope. Queen Melisende, who proved that a woman can be a successful ruler. Agnes of Courtenay, who learned the dangerous game of politics. Sibylla and Isabella, who tried to live in a world where others decided for them, and those unknown women who defended walls, cared for the wounded, and prayed for peace. All of them are inseparable parts of the history of the Crusades. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of the women of the Holy Land, share this video with your friends and write in the comments which story touched you most. Press the like button if you feel this topic deserves attention, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next exciting stories. In the next video, we will talk about the secret life of the Templar Knights and their legendary wealth. See you next time, and let us continue together in this fascinating historical adventure.